Good morning, freshman Seminar UNST 101A students. I want you to watch this video because um, in your writing assignments, the writing assignments that you're going to turn in on Blackboard, which are due Sunday, 6 p.m., by the way, um, there are different ways of asking questions and different ways of answering questions that I want to make sure that we understand very clearly in our class. So, as you probably remember from Sesame Street or other children's programming that you grew up with, there are different kinds of questions. There are what, where, who, when, why, and how questions. And it's important that when a question is asked, that the answer matches the question. So a what question should be answered by a what answer. A why question should be answered by a why answer. So let me give you a few examples to make sure that we're doing this properly. So first, what? A what question? This is a relatively low-level question. We're not asking for a lot of synthesis of information, not a lot of deep thought. It's more of a list kind of a question, or identification of a piece of information. So if I were to ask you, what are the general positions on a basketball team? You could correctly answer center, power forward, small forward, shooting guard, and point guard. And say that would be a list, and that would rightly and properly answer the question. Similarly with where. If I were to ask you, where was Justin Bieber born? And of course everybody knows Stratford, Ontario, Canada. If I were to ask you, who are the members of Team Rocket in the Pokemon franchise, you would say, of course, Jessie, James, and Meowth. If I were to ask you, when did the first entry in the franchise of the Legend of Zelda video game series first come out, I would say February of 1986, and that's a date I remember very well, having been there and having purchased my Legend of Zelda around that time. But the other questions, why and how, are typically asking you to take components of what, where, who, and when and kind of synthesize them together. Okay, so if I ask you a question, why is the sky blue? We're not looking for necessarily a list that would answer a what question. It would need somewhat of a narrative, probably a paragraph to explain the quality of light and refraction of the light in the atmosphere and Rayleigh scattering and bouncing and all that kind of stuff. Also a how. A how is usually a multi-part kind of question with kind of a place where it starts and a place where it ends. So be very careful when you're answering the questions in this week's assignment and all subsequent assignments from now on, that you're very clear that you're answering the question the same way it's being asked. Okay? So that's something I wanted to make sure that we were very clear about. Another thing I want to mention to you is the deep, deep, deep abiding importance in following instructions properly. So when you read a paper prompt or an email or a list of instructions, it's really important that you read the entire message and follow the instructions exactly. And I will make it a point that the instructions will make sense, that will flow from one place and go to the other. One thing that often happens in student assignments is a student may skim the prompt and kind of write it based on skimming it real quick, and that just won't do, because that's, skimming and answering is where we often have the what, when, why, where, who, how stuff get mixed up. So reading the entire prompt of the question and reading everything to the end, because the end may be where there's an important synopsis or kind of like summarization of what's going on. And I often hide Easter eggs. I hide little prizes at the very end of videos or at the very end of assignments. For example, the secret word is swordfish. Swordfish.